Albert Breer, senior NFL reporter, lead strategist for the Monday Morning Quarterback. He joins us on the program. Albert, thanks for joining us. Why was Urban fired last night?
I think it just reached the point of no return, Dan. I mean, like the bottom line is, after everything that had happened over the course of the last, 2 months, going back to October, I think the question Shad Khan had to ask himself was, are people in this building still responding to Urban Meyer? Sometimes perception can become reality. And, I think when the, report from NFL.com, Tom Pelissero did a great job with that last week. When that surfaces and, then you have, the former kicker, Josh Lambo, coming out and saying what he said to Rick Stroud yesterday, the green light's on for everybody who has an issue, everybody who has an axe to grind to come out and say something about it. And at that point, the question becomes, is this the right environment for our young players to be in over the next month? And clearly, the answer to that question for Shad Khan was no. The situation was untenable going forward, and that's why he had to make this move.
What do you think is going to happen with that contract?
It's a great question because I don't know that you can fire him for cause for the Lambo thing because, logistically, and I'm not a lawyer, but logistically, I look at it and it happened in August. And if it happened in August and Shad Khan knew about it and decided to go forward with him and let him coach out 3/4 of an NFL season, then in his mind, did it really rise to the level of a fire for cause sort of offense? Logic would tell you no. My guess is behind the scenes, some sort of settlement is worked out and that maybe we never hear about that. But, I don't know that they can really fire him for cause based on what we've seen to this point, and based on what we know to this point. As unhealthy as that building was, the one thing that I think would maybe potentially rise to that level was something that happened in August and that, according to all accounts, the owner knew about right after it happened.
Who's more likely to get another job first, Urban or John Gruden?
I don't think either of them are working the NFL again. I'll just be honest about
that. Urban can't, but college.
Yeah, and I talked to Urban about this in the summer, Dan, and I didn't sense a great desire to go back to college. And I think the main reason why is because I think recruiting had worn him out. I think the 24/7 nature of it, had sort of become an issue for him as he had gotten older. And I think any coach that's moved from college to the NFL would tell you, one of the biggest benefits is getting away from basically having to live your life 24/7 through a phone at the whims of 16 and 17-year-olds, because recruiting controls who wins and loses at that level, And so I don't know that he would want to dive into the world of recruiting, not to mention what it's become since he left with NIL, with the transfer portal and everything else. And so, maybe that's just, his obsession with competition pushes him back into it. But I think if you asked him right now, he'd probably tell you that he's probably coached his last game.
Yeah, I just don't see it. These guys are so egomaniacal. And he's only 57. He might appear to be an unhealthy 57, but he's still only 57. And I don't know. These guys all think they can fix something.
The other question though, Dan, is right. Who's going to hire him at this point? We've seen cases where guys have gotten back up on their, Hugh Freeze got back on his feet, right? Bobby Petrino got back on his feet. So we've seen examples of it, but does Urban want to take a step back? Because I don't know, would USC hire him right now?
No.
You know what I mean? Would Texas hire him right now? So him going back to college coaching, what level would that require him going in on? And does he want to do that? If he doesn't have the stage of an Ohio State or a Florida, does he want to go back and coach it? And I don't know, I'll throw a name out there, an Iowa State, you know what I mean? Or an Oregon State. Does he want to do that? I don't know. It's hard for me to see because, if recruiting was an issue for him when he was at Ohio State, boy, let me tell you, it's not going to be easier if you're going to one of those tier 2 Power 5 jobs, much less some sort of mid-major.
And I could see a scenario where Ryan Day eventually goes to the NFL.
Yeah.
Luke Fickell takes over at Ohio State. And, because I've already had a couple of people say, could you see Urban if Ryan Day left going back to Ohio State? And I go, I don't see that. I would think that they would look at Luke Fickell before they would Urban
or Matt
Meyer.
Campbell. I mean, there are people who would line up. There are young people who I think would line up for that job. Luke Fickell certainly has the respect of a lot of people in that place. And, I think he would be a candidate. And Matt Campbell, I can tell you for a fact, Dan, I don't know if this was even out there, but in 2018, 2019, before they turned to Ryan Day, they took a very, very hard look at bringing Matt Campbell over from Iowa State before deciding to go with Ryan Day. So there are a couple of guys in Fickell and Campbell who are from Ohio where that would qualify as their dream job that I think that Ohio State would probably go to before they go back to Urban. Now, that said, he was an administrator at Ohio State, right? And, he's obviously still close with Ryan Day. So does the possibility exist that maybe he goes back in some sort of administrative role to Ohio State and helps Ryan Day out? I think that's possible.
How attractive is the Jacksonville job?
I think it was way more attractive a year ago, because a year ago you knew you were getting Trevor Lawrence. So in either case, 2021, 2022, you're getting Trevor Lawrence. Last year, you had a blank slate. You had all the cap space. You had all the draft picks, and you don't have all of that this time around. Now, like the draft picks are on the roster, but you don't get to make those picks yourself. Some of the cap money's spent, so you don't get to spend that yourself. And there are those drawbacks. I don't think the location is the most attractive to a lot of coaches going and living in Jacksonville, Florida, and have to attract players to Jacksonville, Florida. That's not the most attractive. That's not the best situation in the league. And then, the owner hasn't shown that he can win. I mean, let's call it what it is. And I think we all like Shad Khan. Is he more successful than Jimmy Haslam right now?
No.
As an owner?
No.
Right? Like where would he rank? Like based on what he's done in 10 years, where would he rank? Like near the bottom, right? So I think you have to add all those things together. That said, there's still a chance to work with Trevor Lawrence, right? Like there's still a young roster with promising young pieces on it. Travis Etienne, we'll see what he becomes. You got Josh Allen on the defensive side of the ball. You got some veteran pieces like Miles Jack. So there's something to work with there. And I think because of the quarterback, it's attractive, but I don't think it's quite as attractive as it was a year ago.
I was wondering, Byron Leftwich.
Yeah.
Bucs offensive coordinator. I mean, imagine if Tom Brady today had a press conference and just said, hey, I don't know what Jacksonville's going to do, but I would hate to lose Byron Leftwich, but he's going to be a head coach. I don't know, maybe if you jumpstart that talk, if Eric Bieniemy would get a chance here, Brian Dable, who's done a great job with John. You got to get somebody who's going to develop Trevor Lawrence.
And that's the main thing, right? I think you're sort of in the same situation as the Rams were in 2016. And that was a dysfunctional mess on the level of this, like the Rams were. After their first year in Los Angeles, coaching didn't get along with the front office. Jeff Fisher gets fired with a month left in the season. Jared Goff looked god awful. And you remember this, Dan, in year one, right? And so everything for them was how do we get things right in general? But how do we create the right environment for our young quarterback that we drafted first overall? And what do they do? Well, a lot of people said you need an experienced guy to come in and clean this up. They went in the opposite direction. They went completely in the other direction and maybe picked a guy that, it was a year or two early, at least on paper. And it winds up being as big a home run of a hire as we've seen in the last 10 years in Sean McVay. So I think the idea of bringing in a young guy who can energize your building and who can revitalize your young quarterback is good. Byron Leftwich is a good name. You mentioned Brian Daboll. That's another good name. I'd throw Kellen Moore, the Cowboys offensive coordinator who's helped bring Dak Prescott along. He's a good name. I also wouldn't rule out, and this one's going to be, I know that this is sort of a divisive one, Josh McDaniels. I mean, you look at what he's done with Mac Jones in Trevor Lawrence's draft class, right? And it's not just Mac Jones. If you look at his history, developed Matt Castle into a quarterback who won a division title with another team, developed Jimmy Garoppolo into a quarterback who went to a Super Bowl with another team, developed Jacoby Brissett into a guy who's probably going to spend 10 years in the NFL. He's got great track record with quarterbacks. He's been a head coach before. And I will say this too, Shad Khan, Tony Khan, that ownership group, they listened to Bill Belichick. One of the reasons Doug Marrone wound up going from interim coach to full-time head coach in 2017 is because Bill Belichick told the Khans, this guy can do it. So they've got history of going to Belichick. Belichick sort of owes Josh McDaniels one after what happened a couple of years ago with the Giants job and the Panthers job. So it wouldn't surprise me if Bill Belichick went to bat for Josh McDaniels with Jacksonville. And it's not the craziest idea because Josh McDaniels' history of developing quarterbacks is, I think, at an exemplary level.
What about Doug Pederson, who won a Super Bowl and just disappeared?
Right. And there are some interesting, like retread names that I think you're going to hear. And, a lot of them are on the defensive side of the ball, quite honestly, like Raheem Morris, Todd Bowles, Dan Quinn. Like those are all good names that I think you're going to hear kind of go through the cycle this year. Like I think Doug Peterson's another one that's a good name. And, obviously like Carson Wentz benefited early in his career. Now, one sideways later on, but you look early in his career, Doug Peterson was able to build a staff and bringing in like Frank Reich as his offensive coordinator and John DeFilippo as his quarterbacks coach, a staff that was able to support the young quarterback. And they got him playing at an MVP level by year 2. And I know that team, didn't go to the Super Bowl with Carson Wentz, but they went to the Super Bowl with the team that Carson Wentz was an MVP candidate for. So I think Doug Peterson is a name that you kick around and makes a lot of sense. And the beauty of it, Dan, here's the thing: they've got a month now, before before we get to Black Monday, and they're even allowed to hire somebody. And so I think you look at it, if you're them, this gives you the chance to cast a wide net. You don't need to focus on first chance guy, retread guy, defensive guy, offensive guy. They've now got the time to cast that wide net and look at whoever they want to look at.
What's the current state of COVID in the NFL, and are any games in jeopardy?
And well, it's interesting because I don't think so. Like the NFL will tell you that they're not considering postponing games. I think it's going to be much hard. It'll be much harder to move games this year than it was last year, mainly because you got fans in the stands. Like last year, yeah.
Is there a forfeit policy?
The forfeit, yes, but the forfeit policy only goes into effect if the spread within a building can be traced to an unvaccinated player. In other words, like if I'm unvaccinated and I bring it into the office, like then the team can be held responsible for that.
Okay.
If the players who have passed it around are vaccinated, then the league has said they'll do what they can to accommodate everybody. I mean, I think they're going to do what they can to get these games played. Part of the issue, though, Dan, Dr. Alan Sills, the chief medical officer for the league, went in front of the owners yesterday and basically said to them, this is Omicron. That's why this is happening with the Rams. That's why this is happening with the Browns. And the problem we have right now, this is more contagious than the previous strains, but it's also got milder effects. So basically, you're seeing something that's probably going to spread a little easier, but it's going to have less of an effect on the people involved. And that's why they've gone to the union and they're talking to the union about finding a way to change the protocols and make maybe significant changes to the protocols. So a couple ideas that have been discussed. One is incentivizing the booster. And if you get this to say to players, if you get the booster, then you don't have to test anymore. I don't think that one's going to happen. A second idea that I think makes maybe a little more sense is if you test, going back to daily testing, and then if a guy tests positive and he's asymptomatic and he's vaccinated, he can stay in the building. He just has to mask and distance, and he can play because there's been no evidence of on-field transmission of the virus. One way or another, with how quickly this spread between the Browns situation, the Rams situation, and really all 7 of the teams that are in intensive protocols right now, I think the league is concerned that this is the tip of the iceberg, and they are going to be put in certain circumstances where you could have a situation like you had last year in Denver with the quarterbacks or New Orleans with the running backs.
Great stuff. Albert, thanks as always for joining us.
You got it, Dan.
Albert Breer, senior NFL reporter, lead content strategist for the Monday Morning Quarterback. Always smarter when Albert comes on.